My name is John Sidney Smith. Have worked in the film industry, reached the age of 83 and can tell you a few yarns. Having liked films, I went round to the local cinema and asked for a job as a projectionist. And the manager sort of said, "Ooh," yeah. He said, "You can come as a sort of page boy to start with." And they put me in a uniform, which is the sort of thing they had pre-war, and I tore tickets and directed people. And after about 3 weeks, he said, "Right, there's a position for you upstairs." So up I went and saw the projectors with the film rolling around and the smell of, in those days it was inflammable film, so it had a very special sort of smell. But I worked on the projectors, and then curiosity got me. I thought, well, where do all these films come from? And the chief projector said, "Oh, they come from a film laboratory." So I sussed out a film laboratory and managed to get a job there. Up until I went into the Air Force, and prior to that, I worked for a company that made adverts, and that's where I met my dear wife Barbara. But then, after the RAF, I came back and picked up my threads, and more ambitious now. I wanted to, having seen the film processed and printed and goodness knows else, I wanted to know where it was made, because where we lived, we were surrounded by film studios. There was Pinewood, there's three at Elstree, and one at Twickenham, and God knows what else. So I got on a trolley bus and went to Shepherd's Bush, and didn't get past the doorman there. But eventually, I was working in Wardour Street, and Hammer House was there, and I went into Hammer House, and somebody had just left, and they said, "Oh, we want a film librarian." So I started cataloguing all the films that they were making, and any film that was suitable for stock shots. And then gradually I got into production as an assistant editor. And the interesting thing here is that this was around about 1953, and commercial television had first started, and there was a absolute shortage of technicians. And so I was working for Hammer during the daytime, and at night time camera crews would go out and simply film stage productions, and with 1,000 foot of film. And as the film ran out, the next reel was put in there, and our job was to find a suitable place to join the two together, so you recorded the whole program. I can remember some of the artists in those days. There was Jimmy Edwards. Well, I won't go down that too much because it will stress my memory, but they were all top shows in the West End. So that was that, and of course that led me to. I was still working for Hammer, so I'd have to go down to Bray Studios where we were shooting some of the horror films, and I then managed to get myself promoted simply because I was in the right place at the right time, as a sound editor. And that was very interesting, because you create sounds and you put them on the picture, and you edit it all together. And now I'd got now I got confidence, and I went back to Elstree, and I got a job with a editor, and he said to me one day, "I've got this letter from a company in Bermuda. It's an American company, and they want British film crews because they're cheaper than American film crews. You interested?" So I said, "No, half." So off we went to Bermuda for 9 months. I was just married then, and Barbara stayed in this country until I got myself established, because interestingly, they started off making this television series called Seahawk, and the leading man was John, but his claim to fame was he was in a famous American film, which, what a shame, it's not come to my mind right now. But he was a very, very well-established actor, and we all revered him. And the film series started, and being an American company, they hadn't got a sponsor, so consequently they couldn't major on drinks or clothes or virtually anything until they got a sponsor. And eventually they did. It was the Wilson Meat Packing Company. And almost overnight, out came all the scripts they got, and they wrote into them fist fights and God knows what else, bully stuff, because it went with meat and God knows what else. So there we were making these films, and the backlog of films we spiced up a little bit, and the sponsor was happy with that, and that lasted for 9 months. And some of the sound editing had to come back to the UK to have music put on it. And so back I came, freelance all the time, so at least I got a few more weeks' work there. And then, now in Elstree, I was able to flit around and meet people. And well, I can go through all the films. They were just television films in those days, but that's where I got all my experience editing, which took me right the way through. I'm skipping a few years here, right through to when I went to Thames Television, and they started Euston Films. So from 1970 to about to the 80s, I worked for them. But I'm passing an interesting bit. I did actually work with Charlie Chaplin, truly. He was over in this country in the 70s, and he made a film in Hollywood called, in 1928, it was called The Circus, and it was a silent movie. And I don't know if you know this, but he was clever enough to have the rights on all his negatives, so that he always had the decisions to make where they could be filmed or, Anyway, the negatives were kept at Denham Studios, and he had a lady there who would catalogue them. And somehow or other, I crossed his path, and he wanted a score put on this film, which we actually shot at Denham Studios, sound music for it. And that wasn't an easy situation at all, because he was very cantankerous. He was an old man, and his wife, whose name slips me for the moment, Una, of course. She used to sort of pacify him and calm him down, because he was staying in the Savoy Hotel, and we were across the road in some scruffy cutting rooms off the Strand. But I fitted the music to the film, and the film would go along, and he'd look at the picture, and he'd sort of say, "Stop, stop! I can't stand that man. Cut him out." I thought, well, how can I cut him out? Because in those days they just shot the scene straight through, like a stage thing. So if you cut it out, the film would have jumped. So I said, that's not as easy as that, Mr. Chaplin. I said, can I get it in my own time? Yes, she says, you do it later on. I never did do it because I knew what would happen. It just wouldn't work. But anyway, we worked through this film, and every so often he'd sort of say, "Oh, I'm feeling tired now. I'll go across to the Savoy and have a little break." And he'd come back, kept us waiting for ages and ages. And the projectionists, some of them lived in Southend, and they were very angry because they were going to miss their train. And I said, well, don't go, for God's sake, if we don't get it now, we never will. And he'd come back and say, let's have a look at what we've done so far. I didn't do it like that, oh, here we go. And all the boys, So we just sort of kept on doing it until it was to his satisfaction. And Una kept us sweet. What I did get out of it was his autograph, thank goodness. He wrote on one of my business cards, on the back of it, he said, this is what the clowns used to say when they came out into the circus ring. They'd say, "Here we are again," and they'd all do cartwheels and God knows what else. So he wrote on my card, "Here we are again, Charles Chaplin." Yeah. Anyway, I can, do you want me to go any further? Go further.